The Reading Company Technical and Historical Society, RCT NHS, has collected Reading Railroad rolling stock since 1976. We have the largest collection of any one railroad's equipment in the United States. Tours are offered to visitors hourly on a half-hour weekends. The theme of our tour is Form Follows Function. The size and shape of each piece of equipment, its form, is determined by the use the railroad, its function, was using the equipment for. This is an attempt to help the average person understand that not all trains look alike. Visitors' comments have always been very positive to this approach. Visitors see freight cars of various shapes and sizes. These cars are the best example of our Form Follows Function tour. Boxcars were used to carry all types of merchandise, furniture, televisions, breakfast cereal, paper, etc. Covered hopper cars were used to carry bulk materials that needed protection from the weather, like sand, sugar, and flour. Materials were heavy, thus those cars were very short in length. Gondolas carried steel beams, ingots, and scrap metal, all things that did not have to be protected from the weather. Next stop on the tour is our General Motors GP7 locomotive, Reading number 621. The tour becomes interactive when visitors are asked to tell what they think the front or the back of the locomotive is. Unlike automobiles, the locomotive can go 65 miles an hour in either direction, but each railroad designated a front and a back. This was done to ensure safe operations, as the crew knew which end was the front in doing switching maneuvers. Another thing which differentiates locomotives from automobiles is that they're actually electric locomotives that carry their own generators to make electricity, which turns the traction motors on the wheels. EMD GP621 is a first-generation diesel. That means these diesels replaced steam locomotives in the late 1940s. Another locomotive is our General Motors GP30 number 5513. This was the first locomotive acquired by the RCT&H back in 1983. Built by General Motors in 1962, this locomotive was the first second-generation diesel, in other words, replacing diesels that had replaced steam locomotives. The Reading was the first railroad to receive this model locomotive. The 5513 introduced the green and yellow paint scheme found on all subsequent second-generation Reading diesels. The styling with an angled windshield and cowling on the roof resembles the lines of General Motors cars of the early 1960s, which had tail fins, etc. The largest locomotive in our collection is American Locomotive 630, number 5308. It is a 3,000 horsepower freight locomotive built in 1967. It has 6 axles, giving the locomotive 2 more traction motors than the 2 locomotives described earlier. It also has a 4,000-gallon fuel tank. We point out that it would be costly to fill a tank that large, but a diesel locomotive can move a ton of freight 423 miles on just 1 gallon of fuel. Locomotive 103 in our collection, built by General Motors, is the smallest locomotive at 1,000 horsepower. This locomotive was built in 1947 and was used in switching service. The Reading used them to move cars in yards and industrial sidings with sharp curves. The unit wears its original Pullman green paint scheme found on most early Reading diesels. One other interesting locomotive is General Motors number 900, which was used exclusively for passenger service. Geared for 89 miles an hour, they were the only Reading diesels purchased for just passenger service. Built in 1952, the same year as ART 621, it has a very different shape, another good example of form follows function. Highlight of our tour for most people is our 1936 Caboose, which was designed by the Reading Company and was the last Caboose built in the car shops in Reading, Pennsylvania. Visitors are asked what was the purpose of a caboose, and you'll find the answer on the tour. The interior has 3 areas. The bunk area is somewhat like a modern RV. In the old days, crews worked sometimes as much as 16 hours a day. The cupola area was the safety function of the caboose. The last area contains a coal stove, which was used for cooking and for heating the caboose. There is also a water supply and an office for the conductor. Today's railroads do not use cabooses, and that is explained. The dangers of riding in a caboose were also pointed out. The normal tour usually lasts about 45 minutes. Come visit us.